Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Hannah here with me today. Thank you so much for joining me, Hannah. I have been very inspired by your writings and sharings and ceremonial offerings on social media, and I wanted to talk with you and get to know you a little bit more all around menstrual ceremony and all of that. And so I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more and share about your womb-centered healing journey and what's inspiring most to you right now.
Well, what a pleasure it is to be here. I love having these conversations. It's one of my favorite things to get together with other witches, mystics, prophetesses, and just open up the portal to see what wisdom wants to come through and be shared. So it's such an honor to be here today. And yes, as you said, my name is Hannah Borobaby, and I am the portal keeper of Temple Gaia. And it's interesting because although the blood mysteries and menstrual magic has been a huge part of my personal journey for quite some time now, it's actually a new frontier in terms of the work that I'm putting out into the world. I identify as a tantric healing artist, and I offer private sessions and workshops for individuals who are wanting to come into a deeper relationship with their bodies in order to understand how sexuality can be a really sacred and spiritual communion and energy exchange. And I, over the past 5 years or so, have really concentrated my practice on working with men and supporting men in learning how to come into deeper relationship with the sacred feminine within themselves, and then of course by extension with women or with those who embody the feminine. And it was really a little bit before this time last year that my work started to take a new turn when the phenomenal vortex that is Asheville decided to boost me out of the nest. And I went on this soul journey in many ways. I bought a one-way ticket to Europe and went and spent a fair amount of time in the south of France. And that is where I really started to tap into this phenomenal sacred remembering around the menstrual mysteries. And Mary Magdalene and Sarah Lenoir showed up as these phenomenal guides for me. And it was one of those pieces of, life and the way that I had been operating fell apart in a lot of ways. And my entire path got redirected. And there's an experience that I share about in the opening ceremony of my online seminar series called The Blood Mysteries, about a mistake that I made when I was in the south of France, where I offered my blood to a portal on someone's land without asking consent, because it was just such a personal practice of my own that I did, and it didn't even occur to me at the time that I should ask the shamans who hold this land whether it was okay for me to put my blood. And it became kind of a thing, like a big wounding that we had to work through together. And, what that drove home for me was this need and this desire to learn more about what up to that point I had really been practicing on my own and allowing spirit and my intuition to guide me. And so when I landed back in the United States, I knew that the blood mysteries was the place that I wanted to focus on. And I started looking for trainings and programs where I could learn more. And what I found was actually on my global community through Facebook and through Instagram, there were all of these phenomenal healers that I was following. And I realized that there wasn't as comprehensive a program out there as I was desiring. And so I started inviting these women to come and be a part of this program that I crafted called the Blood Mysteries Virtual Voyage into Menstrual Medicine and Magic, which premiered in March of this year, 2019.
Mm.
And so there were 9 of us all together who dove into this journey together. And we had 30 women register for this first iteration. And so together we went on this journey of really just sharing the magic that we all hold and seeing how it came together, and how as we came together, we were activating this sacred remembering and this knowledge for one another. And soon after the Blood Mysteries ended, I connected in with Inga Lind, who you interviewed last week, I believe, and her practitioner partner, Nayla Rose, who had started the Blood Love movement. And it was so cool because when we did the opening ceremony for the Blood Mysteries, we set the intention that the womb web be activated and that the sisterhood rise. And so it was so cool to see the Blood Mysteries end, and then the Blood Love sisterhood explode. And and so it's just been kind of this journey since. And I would say that for me, one of the reasons why the menstrual reclamation is so important on my own journey is because I have orgasmic blockages, which are a big piece of what brought me to sacred sexuality and neo-tantra, to try and heal. And I had really intense experiences with my menstruation early on, where I would be laid out the first day or two in pain. And as soon as I started to learn more about the sacredness of my blood and started to collect it in different ways than, sticking a tampon or using some kind of toxic pad, when I started engaging with it in a much more conscious way that was about asking my body what it needed from moment to moment, and actually allowing my menstrual time to be a time of rest and a time of creation and self-care, and eating whatever I wanted to eat and consuming whatever I wanted to consume and self-pleasuring whenever I wanted to self-pleasure, that my experience of menstruation totally shifted. And now it's actually a time of the month that I look forward to and that I'm planning for in so many different ways, by programming my blood with what it is that I'm wanting to release, with the spells that I want to be casting with it. And it's also become an incredibly unifying force that I, have discovered this soul tribe, this soul community that share this awareness of the sacredness of the feminine cycles, and live by it, live by blood, live by the red 10, live by this sacred feminine principle of the cyclical nature of life and creation. And it's just been like a journey of coming home.
I'm just delighted by this little bell, which I think is a notification on my computer, but it's coming in and like blessing certain sentences that you're saying, like that are very potent, like a little spell, right? Here it is, it's so beautiful. And I'm so grateful to hear about your journey with this, with what you're creating, and the beauty of your healing process around menstruation. Is really a delight to hear, and how you're sharing that with people. It's very lovely. See, it's lovely. So I would love to hear more about some of the, whatever you feel that you can share in this public forum, some of the sacred practices that you teach about in your program. I know some of the things that I enjoy and I've shared about are, of course, giving my blood ceremonially, especially to the garden, to the herbs in the garden. And, I've shared extensively with listeners about, how that giving that energy to the plants, and then that's a conversation with the plants, and then the plants are then creating medicine and healing energies to meet exactly what I need, because they're getting this nourishment and information. So it's this exchange of nourishment and wisdom that we can have with the plants. And so and then of course I've shared about, and in my groups we'll be doing some menstrual art, moon blood art and things like that. And so I'm really curious, and I know that you've been developing this. You had 9 different practitioners come together for how long of a program was it?
It was a 9-week journey that with the opening and closing ceremony was about 11 weeks.
Okay. And so I'd love to hear more about the practices that you offered, that you created, that were discovered perhaps in the process, because that's a very rich, creative thing. You may probably very likely discovered whole new things that nobody had ever tried before in that circle of women. I'm real curious to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I would say, that practice of remembering to collect our moon blood and be really intentional with how we engage with it is a huge foundation of the practice. And I mean, it's funny because that was actually what I was sharing about on that post that recently went viral. It was about my joy and my embracing of my blood and how I love to free bleed, and the image that surprised everyone so much was of the blood on my forehead, having anointed myself on my forehead, and my fingers with my blood up to my lips. And so these are the pieces, right, that that really freaked a lot of people out, because it was this this illustration of something that is so taboo and considered such waste, so dirty, being embraced in a way that was so far outside of the sphere of so many people's understanding. And so, for me, I honestly think that the journey is about finding where our edges are and just playing with those edges. And what works for me isn't going to work for everyone. And, so some of the practices that are really nearest and dearest to my heart are, first and foremost, learning to track our cycles. And this is something that, in our modern day society, women are being asked to, do this 9-to-5 grind while taking care of children and looking after family. And it's this go, go, go sort of a culture that doesn't create time for the, 5 to 7 days of bleed, where a woman is really meant to calm down and go inward and only tend to herself and her own nourishment, because she is processing on behalf of herself, on behalf of her ancestors and her family and the collective at large, so much. And so, part of, I think, the co-opting of the feminine nature and the exploitation of the sacred feminine principle that it is at the disconnect of, of our modern day culture and industry, is because we have disconnected women from the sacredness of our cycles, and actually understanding how the 28-day average cycle of a woman's menstrual period lines up with the 28-day cycle of the moon. And then over the course of that moon cycle, how a woman also goes through seasons. She goes through her winter season, which is that shedding, that menstruation and going inward. And then all of the different phases, the follicular phase and the ovulation phase and the luteal phase, and understanding how even within that 28-day cycle, there are cycles within the cycles, and that our creativity and our fertility really corresponds with where we are in our cycle. And so there is this, this preoccupation in our culture for this linear focused progression of creation that leads to adrenal fatigue. It leads to burnout. It leads to all kinds of physical illnesses, which is the body's way of being like, stop. Tend to your inner world, reestablish this connection, and remember to listen. So tracking our moon cycles, I think, is one of the most powerful ways to start to connect in with our own bodies and our own cycles and nature in general. And what I have found, and what I've heard many other women, really acknowledge in this as well is that, for some women, our menstruation lines up with the full moon. For some women, our menstruation lines up with the new moon. For some women, it's in between. And of course, whatever. So if you're a woman who bleeds on the full moon, then you're going to be ovulating on the new moon. And so you actually start to see how your cycles line up in this incredible way where we can start using our cycles to actually supercharge our ritual with the intentions, right? The intentions of what it is that we're wanting to shed that we know isn't working anymore, and the intentions of what we're wanting to call in. And so when we start to play with those cycles and those awarenesses, and we start to engage in a ritual way of actually supercharging our cycle with the energies that we are calling in and that we are integrating and releasing from our lives, then we also start to play with this awareness that, the blood is in a huge percentage water, and that water can actually be programmed with the through energy, through thought. This has been scientifically proven. And so we can start to imagine that we're actually charging, the energy of our cycles, and whatever it is, whatever ways we choose to actually work with blood magic, just the act of combining our intention with blood, it's like it activates this intention on a whole different level. And, it's incredibly powerful. So some of the practices that we, explored in the blood mysteries were, well, first and foremost, feminine self-care practices, everything from yoni eggs to yoni steams to, how to be gearing our diet over the course of the month to actually support us during our menstruation, which for me, shifting my diet has been one of the biggest ways that I've shifted the discomfort around my cycle, and making sure that my body has all of the nutrients needed before I go into my bleeding phase, has done so much to actually help to give my body the sense of nourishment and relaxation that prepares the way for a joyful cycle. So we worked with nutrition, we worked with different herbs, we worked with womb dance, and how dancing and movement has been an incredible way to not only supercharge the intention of our womb space, but then also give our pelvis and our uterus the conditioning that is needed in order to be able to shed those layers on a deeper level. And then my incredible cohort, Freya McFarlane, who actually does come from a lineage of blood priestesses, she shared about a lot of the alchemical practices, using our blood in tincture, activating a blood stone, how to actually preserve blood and different ways to be using blood in spell work to manifest what it is that we desire. And, it's my thought that it's these alchemical blood practices that in so many ways were the reason why menstruation came to be demonized, because when we work with these alchemical mysteries and blood magic, it really does. Things take off. Like our capacity to just be creatrixes and to manifest becomes, almost intensely and ridiculously so, supercharged. And so one little story that I'll share about that is that, I created that blog post that went viral during my moon cycle, and it was just a channeling of inspiration where the emotions that were coming up for me needed to be expressed in some way, and I never expected it to take off the way that it did. But a couple of nights later, I was at a community gathering near the fire, and I asked the people who were gathered around the fire if it would be okay with them to witness me make an offering with my blood. And they offered their consent, and I did. And it was the next day. after I poured that blood and offered it into the portal of this community ritual with this heartfelt desire, this prayer, right, that I find the key to my magic, and that everyone who shows up in that sacred container and community found exactly what it is that they needed, the nourishment and the support that they needed. Those are the prayers that accompanied my offering. And I woke up the next day and the post had gone viral.
Mm-hmm.
So
how has that viral post served those intentions? Is that post going viral? Is that translating into ways that your vision is being supported and ways that this community of people are being supported as well?
Oh, hugely. I mean, well, the first piece of it is that, I am someone with an abundance of creative energy as a writer, as a dakini, as a teacher, and a blood witch. I mean, part of the challenge for me is picking a focus. And, since the Blood Mysteries, the first iteration of the course ended, I've been putting energy towards all of these different other projects. I'm illustrating my first children's book right now called The Dragon and the Great Oak Tree, which was downloaded when I was in France. And so that's one project I'm giving energy towards. I'm revamping my business and trying to shift away from kind of these one-on-one session styles that I just have been phenomenal, but I feel like aren't supporting, the depth of transformation that I really feel called to help to bring to the collective. So there are all of these projects that have my attention, but picking a focus has been the challenge for me. And so that very clearly, that post going viral to me was a very clear sign from the universe of being like, girl, this is your magic and your medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, focus attention here, get real, hone it in, like,
mm-hmm.
Don't forget that this is the center point in so many ways. So receiving that verification and that very clear direction from the universe has been huge. And in a lot of ways, it actually reactivated my passion for menstrual magic, which after the Blood Mysteries had kind of like simmered down a little bit. So it's kind of reactivated that. The other thing is that and this is the coolest thing about it. I mean, if you look at that post, it's up to about over 5K shares at this point. And the vast majority of those shares are negative. It's people being like, who is this bitch? She needs to get locked up. Like, this is disgusting. Vomit emoji, vomit emoji. But what's so cool is that I have received private message after private message from people who are like, that post got shared by someone who was tearing you down. And at first I was kind of weirded out and disgusted, but then I went onto your page to look at who you are and what you stand for. And I actually find myself inspired. And I ended up removing those toxic people from my life and now want to be part of the Blood Mysteries. And so
yes! Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
So the Blood Mysteries Global Sisterhood Facebook group has gone in the space of a week and a half from 280 members to almost 1,000 members.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And that's not even everyone who has asked to join, because we've been screening everyone that has requested. And there are many people who didn't respond to the questions that we, responded back being like, we need to know that you're serious about wanting to join this container. So it's very, very cool what's happening.
Indeed, it is. Well, that brings me sort of to, before I ask my next question about that, is I just wanted to share a little bit how, that what you were talking about with some of the alchemical practices and all those practices that you described, and, and how all of that culminated in this great energetic burst for you of all of this visibility and this clear focus and all of this response from the collective being drawn to your work. I just wanted to share an aspect about that from my experience that I'm not sure came across in what you were sharing. I just wanted to like crystallize it because, you know, these cycles and the cycles within cycles and all of that, for me, it feels like the engine of our creative process. Mm-hmm. And that if what many people discover, especially women who try to do the linear creation process where you're just do day after day after day, is that peters out. And that's why a lot of people end up with burnout and like that, because it doesn't regenerate itself. Right? And so this cyclical living and what the menstrual blood has in it, you know, the cycles of the seasons, the cycles of the moon, it's how life regenerates in so many ways, more than just it makes it possible for us to gestate a baby, right? It's also how life in nature regenerates through the seasons, you know, through life and then death. You know, the leaves falling from the tree nourishes the tree so that it can have the nourishment that it needs for the next season, the next spring, and producing more fruit. The fruit that falls from the tree and rots on the ground does the same thing, giving the nourishment back to the tree. The fruit itself, as it rots, nourishes the seed for a new tree to come. So this cycle through the seasons, this menstrual cycle, is the engine that propels the creative process and keeps it going. It's like a wheel. We can travel using wheels because they roll and they keep us going. You know, there's squares don't roll.
And that's a scientific fact.
It's a scientific fact, right? Straight lines don't roll, they lay flat. Okay, so this cyclical nature of our lives is such a powerful engine for our creative process, and the key for those of us whose vitality is laying flat, who's, you know, we're feeling burnt out, we're feeling uninspired when life gets flat, what you were talking about, connecting with our menstrual cycles, or if we're not menstruators, connecting with the cycles of the seasons, the cycles of the days, getting into our cyclical nature, and you know, and relearning to connect with that and allow for that, and sort of divorcing this whole linear enslavement, if you will, that we've been experimenting with. And guess what? The experiment isn't working, right? It just creates exploitation and unhealthy humans. And so where humans are forced to live a flat, kind of half-dead life, the land of the dead, the land of the living dead, right? There's a reason there's so many zombie movies out there, right? And so I just wanted to for me, I have this visceral experience of the menstrual cycle being the engine of our creativity, and I just wanted to bring that piece of it, that it's the energy generating force. And so these practices that you're talking about and that I share about, some of them too, in working with the plants in my programs, these practices really can regenerate where we're feeling flat, dead, you know, zombified by
Yeah. And I absolutely, you know, I think that the energetic rest aspect of it all has a huge part to do with it, you know, because how many of us actually take 3 to 5 days out from our schedule to just rest and go inward, every moon cycle. And yet there were ancient cultures that lived by this principle, right? That there needed to be a Sabbath in so many ways. And then the other piece of it that I see is really important is that, anyone who knows someone who bleeds knows that that person tends to be very emotional when they're on their cycle. And so there's this aspect of emotional cleansing and purification that happens as a part of the cycle, to the point where sweat lodges and the sun dance were created in order to create a sort of a replica of that cleansing process for male bodies that didn't bleed. And so there's this recognition, this awareness that part of the power of that time of menstruation for a woman is the depth and the extent to which she is a channel for emotion. And, if you go to, there are all kinds of towns at this point in time where people are, drugged out on opiates. And, there's this incredible addiction to painkillers that is really killing people in our society. I actually lost a lover to addiction this year. And so this is an awareness that is very alive for me. And, my understanding is that addiction is this way of trying to escape our emotions, trying to detach and separate ourselves from the intensity of being human at this point in time and the depth of feeling and emotion that comes up as a result of that. And so the emotional components of menstruation and the power that comes through being able to have this time and this space connecting. Another one of my favorite menstrual practices is singing and vibrating my vocal cords in a way that vibrates all the way down to my womb, as a way to help that energy and that emotion move through. I think that that's a huge part of the power of menstruation as well. And one of the things that as our culture has been really not just demonized, but like shamed in a really big way. Like I remember one of my favorite jokes when I was younger is like, why is PMS called PMS? Because mad cow disease was already taken.
Gosh. Well, and that just brings up how, and that joke is the epitome of the shaming that takes place around our emotional sensitivity when we're menstruating, and this shaming around emotion in general. There's a whole cultural, I don't know what to call it, but there's a cultural template that says emotions are a nuisance, they're a waste of time, they get in the way of what needs to be done. We should just ignore them, suppress them, shame them, don't allow them. And yet they are a huge part of this engine of our creativity and of our life regenerative power, as we can tell by how intricately they are involved in our menstrual process. And our emotions are our source of deep wisdom and can inform us about our true desires and it's like guidance from the spirit world and from our soul about what we're meant to be doing and what our soul purpose is. I feel is very much being guided by our emotions, and so that has been so suppressed, just like our menstrual wisdom has been suppressed. It's all of the same set, I feel. And so thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that I talk about a lot in my programs and work with a lot with the plant medicine, particularly flower essences, because the flowers have such refined and nuanced emotional healing messages and energy for us to find the wisdom in our emotions. And so, and menstruation practices are excellent at like taking that time to really listen to those emotions and what they're telling us as such a powerful remedy for the shame and all of that goes on around that sensitivity. And that's all PMS is that sensitivity to what's going on, and having, often very wise emotional responses of, this isn't okay, and this is why, and learning to have a wisdom around that, and learning to sort out, the old toxic residue from all the times we weren't listened to, and we didn't listen to our own inner guidance and all of that, and let that go, and find the current now wisdom of, what is this emotion telling me now? What choices do I need to make now? What new directions, what requests do I need to make of my loved ones, and like that. And so the menstruation process is the engine for sorting all of that out for ourselves in this whole life healing process. So my goodness, we could go on and on talking about all of these things, Hannah. Thank you so much. You're really an inspiration. I'm so glad we got to talk here. I wanted to just give you a chance to perhaps get that Facebook group would be the preferred way for people to reach out and get in touch with you, or perhaps something else. If someone wanted to connect more with you, if our listeners wanted to connect, how would they do so?
Yeah, there are a couple different ways that people can connect with me. So my website is templegaia.com. That's GAIA.com. And Temple Gaia is the portal through which I offer a lot of my workshops, sessions, and trainings. I do one-on-one coaching distantly and in person, both around menstrual magic, but also just what I like to call conscious sexuality and sacred embodiment, which is, remembering that we are spirit beings who chose to come into these bodies, and offering people perspective and tools and rituals and practices that can help to not only deepen this connection, but establish, greater life force by tapping in with our subtle life force energy and learning how to move and direct that, juiciness. So Temple Gaia online, templegaia.com. You can also find me on Facebook as Hannah Borobaby, or you can look at my pages. The Blood Mystery Virtual Voyage has a business page, and Temple Gaia Tantra has a business page. And if the Blood Mysteries is really something that you want to explore, then tapping in and joining the Blood Mysteries Global Sisterhood, which is a closed group for those in female bodies. You don't have to bleed, but if you want to connect, more with blood magic and womb magic, then that's an incredible community that's growing. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Temple Gaia Tantra, and I've got YouTube videos under my name, Hannah Borobaby, as well. So yeah, there are a number of different ways that people can plug in with me, and I'm always happy to receive private messages from people who are interested and curious and wanting to learn more.
Okay, so wonderful. Lots of places to find you, and I'm sure lots of very evocative material that you have to share, as we have felt today in the podcast. And I'll just share too that if you're interested, listeners, in learning more about the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com and learn all about the upcoming Biomystical Womb Apprenticeship and other events that we're having in the temple. So thank you again, Hannah, for joining us today. And thank you, listeners. That's all for now. Until next time.